So I'll officially call this meeting to order at 7:04. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Public Works Facility Subcommittee meeting. I appreciate everybody's time tonight. So what I was intending with this meeting is obviously we have the subcommittee. We're out to RFP for a feasibility study for a new facility for Public Works. So with that being put out to advertisement, I figured it'd be a good time to have an icebreaker, kind of familiarize ourselves with the group. I asked Rick if he could go through a little bit of historical perspective, and we'll talk about some details as we move on. To start off really quick, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Joe Conway, Director of Public Works. With me on the other side of the room, who you can't see, I have Chris Pierce, our business manager, Bill Renault, town engineer, Ann Waite, business manager, Chris Hunt, operations manager, Rick Stinson, my predecessor, former director here, Joe Harrington, citizen member of the committee. Hi, Joe. I see Joe Bertrand from the Permanent Building Committee. And Ken, I'm sorry, I don't think we know each other. Do you mind just stating who you are and how you found us tonight?
Sure, yeah. So Ken Guyette, I'm with Collier's Project Leader, Senior Director of Project Management. I'm here with Jeff Gutzfeld from my office. We're both just interested in the project as potential OPMs.
Cool. Awesome. So Joe, before I go into public participation, do you have anything that you want to add up front, or you just want to kind of play it as we go? Joe Bertrand, excuse me.
No, I'm good, Joe.
Okay, just checking. At some point in time, Joe, we'll touch base on kind of how the process goes from your standpoint.
Okay.
So with that being said, Ken, if there's an option for public participation, you want to tell us a little bit about your company and some of the things that you find interesting with the potential here, with some of the services you can offer? Sure.
So again, we're with Collier's Project Leaders. We're an OPM firm. We've got offices throughout Southern New England. We focus on owners representation services, whether it's owners project management or commissioning and energy services. And this is kind of our bread and butter work. We do a ton of municipal work, whether it's DPW facilities, senior centers, town halls, city halls, all throughout the Commonwealth, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and just very interested in being able to take a look at potentially partnering up on this project.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining us. So just a little bit of background information. So everybody knows the RFP is officially available the 19th. Inside of that, we've included a site walk, which we have tentatively scheduled, weather permitting, for December 1st. We've asked that any proposer gets back to us by the 2nd with any questions that they might have. We'll answer those by December 4th. And then we're asking that all submissions come in by December 8th at 10 a.m. That's all included in the advertisements and whatnot, but I figured I would just state that so everybody kind of has an idea of the timeline. So with that, I think I'll move down the agenda to the background update, and I'll probably turn it over to you, Rick. I think I have a pretty good understanding of how we got to this point, but if you want to kind of give out the historical perspective for everybody here, I think that a refresher in some of our not so distant history would probably be good.
Great, thanks, Joe. Couple things that I'll mention is that, as you all know, the facility is pretty old. Goes back parts of it to the 30s, 1930s. And it was updated in, I believe it was 72 or somewhere around there, that it was, there was an addition put on. And since that time in 1972, there has been very little funding that has been provided. And that's for, we're talking 50 years, almost 48 years. In a number of reasons. One, at times, the economy was not good and finances were not good in town. And there's always been other priorities that have come up. And so the facilities continued to deteriorate over the years. In the past, probably 20 years prior to my retirement, we were fortunate to obtain from the town $100,000 one year to do some improvements and $500,000 to do some improvements that are critical just for the safety of employees. There have been a number of reports done on the condition. I wrote 2. And then there was one done by a consultant in 2017 that really detailed some stuff, but was also looking at the Camp Curtis site that we were hoping to participate with Reading, which has not really moved that quickly and may not move at all because there's so many logistics involved. But the facility has a huge number of issues that need to be addressed. And I think that at the end of the day, to bring that facility up to where it should be and what for the safety of employees to accomplish the work that needs to be done for the town, you'll probably spend more over the years rehabbing that than you will actually kind of building a new facility. And at the end of the day, if you rehabbed it, you're going to have a facility that still doesn't meet the needs because it just physically can't meet the needs of what the town needs. You know, the staff has done an excellent job of, with no funding, trying to keep things going and keep things safe. But I think now a lot of things are starting to show up, and Joe can talk about those better. I know we just did some evaluation there, but there's a lot of things popping up now that with 100,000 or 500,000, you just can't address. It's just too expensive. So
just to piggyback on that really quick, some of the some of the recent things that have happened on the administrative side of the house, so the fleet end, we just accepted a contract to redo the roofs there. Some of the things we have going on structurally, some of the tin underneath the roof and the insulation is all compromised due to water, and the thing is leaking like a sieve. So we're basically applying the best Band-Aid that we can to it so that it doesn't pour down on top of us continually like it has been. Some other things that we've had done is we have the structure looked at. All the mezzanines are currently being finished for weight ratings. We have a lot of suspended loads over wood. And then we've asked a structural engineer to take a look at the floors because we have a significant amount of settlement that's going on. We're afraid that the building is moving at differential paces, and you could see that if you were to walk through the site with the different levels of the floors that at one time I would imagine were pretty dead flat. With that, we probably have enough money to address the other side of the roof. And then more than likely, we're going to need some structural evaluation and some borings done under the floors to figure out how to make those stop sinking. And then we'll likely need additional funding to be able to complete that project. So Rick, you're 100% right that, you know, it seems like we keep putting Band-Aids on this building when we needed a tourniquet a long time ago. So the question to the town is obviously, how much do we want to keep doing this before, you know, we ultimately decide that it's just not financially smart anymore. So that leads us into this exercise.
So I had one other thing, if for a minute, if I could.
Yeah, by all means.
And I think what's really paramount is that the safety of the employees and the environmental impact that facility could have, because it is dealing with equipment, large equipment, fuels and oils and all kinds of stuff. So so you have that concern environmentally. I can tell you from past knowledge that if EPA came in through there, they would and did a facility audit, which they used to do and still do occasionally. The just the fines for stuff that you can't fix could be huge. Natick, when they got fined back in the early 2000s, or a little maybe 1999, their fine was $460,000. They worked some of that down, but by the time they got done with lawyers' fees and everything else, they were over $1 million right there just to kind of take. And they had a really good facility and operation, and they still got hit with a huge fine. So for both the environment and the safety of the employees, which is critical, you don't want to see anyone get hurt. It's important that something be done to address the facility there, and plus to meet the needs of the future for the town, which they struggle to do now. And then the last part I wanted to mention was the salt shed, which is also deteriorating and is probably, geez, I don't know, that's got to go back into the maybe even the 60s or longer. And that needs to be replaced. Environmentally, you can, and I've talked previously to the Conservation Commission, you could put a shed in the same place, but the cost is huge. But environmentally, make a huge environmental impact by an improvement by redoing that. Not just the fact that you'd save money on materials and all kinds of other stuff. I'm good, Joe.
All right. So, I mean, that's basically what we have going on in a nutshell. I think most of us probably understand it. Joe Harrington, I don't know how much of that you were hip to before tonight, but that's kind of some of the sins of the past and the woeful stories that got us to this point. I think Rick's done a lot of longitudinal work and data that is year after year or attempt after attempt to try to establish something. And luckily we're here at this point because of that. As far as this RFP is concerned, I went through the dates. Some of the things that is requested for this to look at is a redesign of the facility on the current site that exists now. There's also some language in there to ask if there's a possibility of reshaping some of the layout, potentially what a taking of the Kytron building or, a little bit of the land in the alleyway behind the building, what that might look like spatially to see if it could help our needs. The other part of this is it also mentions that we'd like to evaluate 2 sites. Knowing that Wakefield's pretty built out, that might not be something that is super feasible. What I'm hoping is that part of this group, we can kind of fast track that and narrow down if there's any options that we want to explore. If we ultimately decide that there isn't any land available that we think can make work for a cost that the town could absorb, maybe we would focus all of our efforts on paying attention to the building on the site that it is now and making that, layout the safest and most logistically efficient that it can be. Once all that comes in, Joe Bertrand, can I ask you, so I haven't been through this fully with the Permanent Building Committee, so once the RFPs are in, can you just tell us kind of how that review process goes with your group and then what that might look like for us?
Sure, Joe. Basically, I'll just go by what we have in the past. We've reviewed the design. It'll be essentially design people that'll be applying for this. The initial submissions will go to the Permanent Building Committee as well as to you, to the Advisory Committee for questions and comments. What we've done in the past is we actually did like a scoring system to see who we would like to interview. And then once that is scaled down to a reasonable number, hopefully, we would then have, interviews of the various applicants. And scoring systems will then be included in that. And based upon the scoring systems, the Permanent Building Committee will then vote on the preferred select designer, engineering company, whoever it may be.
No, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. While that is going on, it would be tasked of this group to kind of do some of the legwork and the homework and start compiling some of the things that we want to ask potential designers, or compile our wish list basically of things that we're looking to try to achieve that might not be directly called out in the RFP itself.
Yeah, that certainly would be helpful. Much of the work, though, is really going to be this subcommittee, once that company is selected, to go through more of like the work as a working group, go through great detail. Because unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, the permanent building committee has there's a lot of projects on right now from the high school, from the finishing up the Greenwood, and the public safety building. So what would be greatly appreciated is this working group deals with essentially the nitty gritty of what is going to occur. I will appoint liaisons from the permanent building committee to the advisory committee so that there's good communication there.
And then how about, I'm assuming I'm the de facto chair of the subcommittee. Do you need the whole committee at the meeting, just myself as representation when you guys meet a full permanent building committee meeting?
For what purpose? For what? Which one? For the
I'm just-
interviews, I'd like to have
Just to provide periodic updates, things like that.
Oh, absolutely. No, you don't need to have every, I would like to have, though, everybody appear. Like we just did for the public safety building, for the request for the OPM for the public safety building. Every single member of the advisory committee appeared, and if anybody had questions, they can ask. And I think that would be really appropriate, because you guys have greater knowledge, obviously, of the facility and what needs to be done during that interview process.
Okay, I know we're mixing in some holidays, within this process, but any rough timeline of when you're at the interview stage and narrow down to try to select a designer?
I would think it would have, probably with the holidays and everything, it'd have to be the beginning of January, don't you think?
Okay, yeah, I think that's
I think
realistic
that's
too.
a reasonable thing. We can't ask. I mean, if your submissions, as I noted, is coming in this December 8th, you're going to take some time to review them, doing the initial scoring, and then probably you're going to run into the holidays. So really, probably the beginning of January, we'll have the interviews for the various companies, if that makes sense for you guys.
100% to me. And feel free, anybody, Bill, Chris, and if you have, or even Joe Harrington, if you have anything to add or any questions, jump right in. I don't want this to be super stuffy. It's supposed to be a good kickoff conversation. Just to touch a little bit on what Joe was saying, the nitty gritty. My interpretation of this, I almost see this group breaking off into focus groups. There are a few things that I've identified that we should explore up front while we're waiting for proposals to come in, but I think I'm personally all ears for whatever might get suggested. But up front, obviously, we mentioned that the potential alternate sites. So I think that a few of us should at least put our heads together to think about, are there any other pieces of land that we can either acquire or we already own? And just to kind of vet that out so that we're not wasting the designer's time by doing that. I think we all have a pretty good idea of the layout of the town, and we can fast track most of that and either give it a yay or a nay and whether or not it might be financially possible. One of the other focus groups I was thinking that would need to happen is kind of a group of people to sit down and start thinking about the spatial needs, what type of shops that we need. I know Rick's done a lot of this before. This one I would probably say would have to be somebody on staff. I think I would take the conversation to the labor group, the supervisors group, to figure out, what are some of the quirks to their day-to-day, some things that, would make life easier or them able to do their jobs a little bit better. And then to figure out, how we might want to think about laying that out. Can we meet our deficiencies and get it into the site, or can we not? And then the last thing I was thinking of is, obviously it played out really, really big with the police station, but community messaging. So I think the second time around, I was probably a little bit more in tune to it, but they put a pretty concentrated effort into explaining to the public why they were seeking what they were seeking and how it benefited not only the end user who worked for the police and fire department, but how it benefited the taxpayer in town who would come in and do business there. So thinking about early on how we would inform the community, I think it's a good opportunity for us to kind of explain a little bit to people, what are some of the things that we do that they might not understand. We're kind of the Swiss Army knife of town. We're doing a little bit of everything. So maybe getting some of that messaging out there and how a new facility potentially helps that, makes it more reliable, more consistent, would be important. I couldn't think of any other focus areas that we needed to think of up front. If anybody has anything else to add to any of that, please feel free.
Joe, what would the vehicle for that messaging be? Are we talking like the daily item website, periodic updates, or what?
It's a good question. I guess one of the first questions you have to answer, how are people getting their information and how do we take our information to them? So it could be, you're always going to have your old school Wakefield that's reading the daily item that's going to get it there. You're also going to have, people on the internet directing people to the website. We have to figure out how we want to target our messaging and what audience we want to send our message to, and then come up with creative ways to get that out there that's understood in a way that we're not using jargon or real technical terms. We want to make sure that the layperson understands. Sometimes it's easy, especially with the better half of this group, to talk in almost a foreign language because it's what we do every day. But, the general public might not understand that. So we want to make sure that we're relatable in everything that we do. So I think that thinking about that up front is going to be important. Anybody else? No, Joe Harrington, can I put you on the spot for a second?
Sure.
So as a community representative, I feel like Rick had originally recommended you because you're very well in tune with what's going on in town. Where is this on your radar? So were you even aware that we had, deficiencies down there, that we were thinking about doing this type of stuff? What's your perception of it?
Well, I mean, I grew up in town, so I knew when it was remodeled. It was a long time ago when I was a kid. So I knew that nothing much had been done. So, but no, I hadn't heard anything. You start to hear different things going on in the project, the public safety building, that sort of thing. I hadn't heard anything about new DPW facilities. So I don't think there's any knowledge out there at all about it. I think you're right. There's a small group of, I'm going to say small, because I ask around. There's a small group of people that read the item, or maybe get it, whether they read it or not. I think, the patch, I think Twitter, you can get, if you get the right people following, you can spread it pretty widely. So if you get people that are, especially folks that are involved with sports, either youth or high school, and someone follows a message, that hits a pretty big audience when you do stuff like that. So I think you could do that. The patches, I know a lot of folks follow information in the patch at least once a week. They go and check that. So it's a good way to get things out there. But yeah, the item hits a very limited cross section of town.
Sure. I think that hits your, I want to call it old school base, but I think of people like my parents, right? They get the item every day and they look at it every single day.
Hey, I get the item.
Yeah, right.
Not as old as your parents.
They're the ones that would get that information that way.
Right. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Sure. I mean, so I would think that this, at least that portion of this would be kind of it would almost be like a grassroots type of experience, but I think you almost have to leverage the social media and the digital aspect to it to really hit home with probably the majority of the people that now, reside in town.
Yeah. I think you also need to get out there all the things the DPW does. A lot of people aren't aware of all the, whether it's school grounds, that sort of thing. A lot of folks, I mean, because I bump into people all the time. I'm on the lacrosse board of directors, and you talk to folks whose kids play lacrosse, and they have no idea who does what in town. They really aren't tuned into that. So if you can get that information out there, how important it is and all the work that you do, it'll just help your cause, I think.
Hey,
Definitely.
Rick, one thing too, I think leveraging WCAT, ideally you would want to bring people through for a tour, but unfortunately we have this COVID thing going on, so that kind of restricts that. But getting maybe WCAT involved to do some videos, walking through with you or whoever, that really points out and focuses in on the deficiencies, the safety issues, the needs of the facility, and doing a bunch of those that they end up putting on cable for people to view. So they start to get a feel of what the issues are and begin to see, even when you're doing repairs now, those temporary repairs, to capture those issues that are costing a lot of money so they can see what the condition is. I think that's important.
Yeah, no, totally. I think at least the digital media and pictures tell you everything that you need to know without saying a word sometimes. That can convey things that written word doesn't necessarily do. Let me ask this question. So if we were to break up some of the things I talked about, does anybody think that there's anything else that this group should focus on? I mean, I identified those 3 areas, but is there anything else that I'm missing? I'm only one person, so whatever the team decides.
I think you talked a little bit about the spatial needs discussion, Joe. I mean, that's part of the RFP, and that's going to be really probably handled by the consultant for the most part. So,
Yep.
I don't know how much of that we would be doing here, per se. Maybe it's getting staff to be prepared for those meetings. In some projects that I've done in the past, for school departments, they really weren't prepared for it, and that became an issue. And so after we, halfway through the construction of the project, they said, well, why didn't we do it this way? Why didn't you add this? I said, well, we had a meeting with you to discuss this, before the project started. So just making sure everybody's ready in the team, at least on public works side. That's the only thing I think I would just say, that I don't know how much of a task that would be for this group per se.
Probably not. So I actually, when I wrote that down, I actually I thought that would be something that Chris Pierce and Chris Hunt could probably handle pretty well. And I thought of it like this, what are the must-haves? What are the nice-to-haves? And what are the things, if we have, that would be great, but it's more of like a 3rd-tier priority type deal. I think understanding that from the ground level up would obviously give us a better end product.
Right.
So I think one thing on that too is
Yep.
if you gave them, because it's a great starting point. I had done the 2 memos I mentioned in 15 and 16, and then there's the report by the consultant in 17, which has a lot of that spatial need information
Right.
already developed. So it's taking that, because I know you've bought some newer equipment that's larger,
Sure.
fitting that in, and then fitting in, how do you, if you build a new salt shed in the same location, how do you rotate like winter, summer equipment so that you can maximize the space at North Ave if that's where it was going to be? But a lot of that information is in those reports, and you could take and build on that and update what you have added since the 2 reports were done, or 3 reports were written.
So let's go through the first one. So alternate sites. Bill, I figured that you and I could probably blow through that in no time.
Sure.
And if anybody else wants to be involved with that, please don't be shy. I just thought, I've been here for way too long. I kind of have an idea of what might be out there. And then, Bill, you bring the engineering eye to it and kind of rule out, are we lowland? Are we upland? Are we going to be buried in water? What do we perceive that our ground's going to look like? One of the things we don't probably want to do is build over peat and have issues with all the heavy things that we're doing start sinking.
We'll avoid that. Yeah.
So if that's the case, and nobody else wants to join, I'll take that task, and Bill, you and I can go through that. Certainly, Rick, if you have any ideas of things outside of Camp Curtis that you've thought of in the past, I'm probably gonna bend your ear on quite a bit of it. So just a heads up there. Chris Hunt and Chris Pierce, do you guys feel comfortable with starting to put your heads together and develop a plan of how we're going to engage the line level employee?
Yeah.
Sure.
Definitely.
Okay.
We can also get the information from Rick's report and unwind it.
Yeah. So one of the things we'll definitely have to do is make sure that what came in those previous reports is still applicable today.
Right.
And then, what might we have to tweak, and then actually get some buy-in and some input from.
Well, that's what you're looking for, is the buy-in.
Exactly. Okay, so that takes care of that. So the community messaging thing, Joe, I think you hit it on the head about the relatability. So if you're up to the task, I'd love to pair you with Rick and Ann, our business manager, to kind of put together some sort of roadmap for us, headed in that direction, to see if we can, lay out the path ahead of us so we can make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's and making sure that the message we're trying to develop is getting out, and it's not only getting out, but it's getting received.
I think you probably want to also tag in Jen McDonald at some point there for that. I mean, she does do, that is her gig, so.
Totally. I think once we figure out kind of what it is we have to say, I think we'll leverage Jen probably quite a bit. We'll certainly leverage Ian and the guys down at WCAT too. This is more of just kind of identifying where some of the weaknesses might be in our messaging to this point, and how do we overcome that and get it to where we want it to go.
So do we plan to have the public allowed in the building at the new building where they're not allowed in the building currently?
I'm not opposed to it. I think if the administrative side of the house was to move there and it was all to be on one campus, we would have to allow that to happen. That would be a question. That would be a question for the designer, whether or not you can fit that all in one place. I'd like to see it if I could. I think logistically, we talk about it quite a bit, to be able to have everything and only walk down the hall instead of having to go across town and then wait for the train to go by to get, to the other side of the group.
Yeah, I
That
think
would
it's
be nice.
maybe a good selling point too for the public, kind of one-stop shopping, go down there, take care of all your DPW needs at one stop.
Yeah, I think one of the other added benefits to it, maybe potentially, if that were to happen too, is space is obviously a commodity that we don't have an abundance of. And, I'm just thinking our first floor office at Town Hall, that frees up a third of the floor space here for the town to grow in another way. How that would be, I don't know, but it certainly could be advantageous, to the town itself. Anybody have anything else? Anybody have anything else that they want to bring up, talk about?
Joe, I was thinking, I don't know, maybe because it seems like most of the town's messages come out of the town of Wakefield Facebook page or their web page. Maybe if we had our own page almost, and we started to like introduce people to what we do every day, small stuff, everyday messaging, rather than just dropping, hey, we need a brand new building, here's why. I think if we had like a message starting out, hey, this is what Public Works does, this is what we do every day, here's why we need this, here's why we need that, separate from the actual town page, because that could get there's a ton of stuff that goes out on the town page. I'm just thinking it could probably get washed out with all the messages and everything that come out of Jen's office. Maybe if we had our own separate page, Public Works, blah, blah, blah.
I'd imagine the likely transition of the messaging would start with who we are, what we do, and then we get to the point where people start understanding that, and then it's how can help us help you, right? By making us more efficient, we can add X more value to your daily experience here in Wakefield. I think that would be something, that we would have to work towards. I'm pretty confident in Rick, Joe, and Ann being able to put together some ideas of how we would lay that out.
The tough part's gonna be that you have already a few big ticket items. The high school, you have the public safety building, and they just did the move from the Greenwood, and now you have to sell them on this.
Right.
It's gonna be a tough sell. People are gonna be worried about their taxes and worried about everything else. And it's gonna be an uphill battle to win the people over. Not that it can't be done, because it probably absolutely can be. Just has to get the message out the right way.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody heard what Chris Pierce had just said, but basically the competitiveness and the needs of the town right now that's happening, it almost kind of dials up the pressure a little bit to make sure that, everything we do, we're moving with a purpose to say, and what's targeted hits, and it's something that, sticks and really gathers support. We shall see, that's for sure. As far as meetings, I know we have a little bit of time before the RFP is technically due, but does nighttime generally work for everybody? I know, Joe, you had mentioned that nights are probably best for you. I don't know what you have going on, Rick.
At nighttime is good. It works for me. So, whatever makes it is easier for everyone else. So.
I think that definitely having Zoom makes it probably a little bit more convenient or related to that.
Right.
So should Rick, do you wanna head up putting together something with Joe and Ann? You quarterback that, figuring out the community messaging piece to that. Bill, you and I can talk, and then Chris and Chris,
Yep, we'll get together.
you guys can do your thing.
Yep, sounds good.
I'm not trying to be intentionally brief, but I really just kind of wanted this to be an icebreaker so we can all kind of get in, say some of the things on our head, and then, get moving. As far as the next meeting is concerned, I was thinking that we could probably meet in the week after the RFPs are due. So sometime between December 8th and let's say the week of the 16th. I'd probably intentionally try to avoid getting a little closer to Christmas.
Sounds good. You want to do a set night? Is there a set? Is this
So
Thursday night good?
the only nights that are tough for us is Mondays, because we have our advisory board meetings, but FinCom and that stuff won't start yet. So at least on my end, I'm pretty available, whatever. I don't know. Does anybody else have a night that's just complete poison?
No.
Joe Bertram, what night do you guys usually meet? I just want to make sure that we're not on top of each other if we have to come in and talk to you guys.
We do usually meet on Thursdays.
Okay. So would anybody be opposed to like a Wednesday?
That should work.
Perfect. If we said Wednesday, I want to say Wednesday, December 16th for the next meeting
What time?
at 7, if 7's still good.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so what I'll do in the meantime, by that point in time, we'll have the RFPs. I'll make sure everybody in the subcommittee gets a copy to review. That'll give us some time to get them out to Joe. We can start reading them and picking through them and then touch base. I would ask, if possible, Chris and Chris, start putting your heads together.
Yep.
We'll come up with little bit of an update of kind of what your brainstorming session would be.
Okay.
Rick, Joe, and Ann, if you could do the same thing, at least then, it puts us in a position where we're ready to hit the ground running.
Hey, Joe, one suggestion,
Absolutely.
especially for maybe Joe Harrington. I don't know if Ian has it or Chris Hunt, but is to send out I think Bill does, the 2 memos I wrote, and then the consultant's report that was done for Camp Curtis. That'll give anyone who doesn't have that, that'll give you a lot of background on what was previously looked at and the conditions found, and also the information on the needs assessment that was in there, and some preliminary stuff on layout and that type of stuff.
Sure. So what I'll do is I'm actually staring at the bookshelf full of all of it now. I'll copy all that and then we'll deliver it. So I guess we'll just be delivering it to you, Joe, because everybody else works here, but we'll drop it off at the house. So what I'll do is I'll email you and let you know that it's coming. I'll drop off a mail envelope for you. You can poke through it. Have you ever been through our site, Joe?
Which one?
North Ave.
I've been in it, but just pieces of it here and there.
If at any time, if you and I want to get together, I can give you a walkthrough and kind of see it firsthand.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I don't know. I'd love to get groups into it. I don't know what that's going to look like. That's probably not going to be until the spring, or at least until they have a handle on which way the pandemic is going to be going at that time. But
Right.
I think you and I could probably safely manage that together if you want to.
2 Joes. Yeah, I think we can handle it.
All right. I mean, with that, I don't want to take up any more of anybody's time. Like I said, I just wanted to have an icebreaker because we're out to advertise and get everybody acquainted with each other and get rolling. If anybody has anything to add, please do. If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All right. We'll adjourn at 7:46.